Include now. Brought to you by Evenbreak.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Include Now. And I'm your host Adam Hyland. In this episode we are going to be looking into the topic of inclusive recruitment. Now, inclusive recruitment at Evenbreak is a topic that we discuss on a daily basis. But we are also aware that maybe outside of Evenbreak work is not always a normalised conversation. We also know that in the UK in particular, there's a huge disability employment gap of around 29%. If we think about the employment gap, I understand that as disabled people, the average household that has a member of a family who is disabled, the average household expenditure is over £900 more than a family who may not have a disabled person in their household. So with that in mind, we really start to get the picture in terms of why inclusive recruitment is so important. I'm delighted to be joined today by two fantastic guests who have been working in this field, and we're going to explore the topic of inclusive recruitment and why it's so important, and certainly not just the right thing to do, but it's also business imperative for many organisations. So we have today the wonderful Rozana and Jane, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and just tell us about your current role and how you got into this kind of work. And I'm going to start with Rozana, that would be amazing.
Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. So I'm Rozana Green, and I am the outreach lead at the BBC, which to many people it's like, what does that mean? That's just a word. Essentially, my job is how do we attract talent to the BBC that maybe don't see it as a place for them, or maybe don't feel like they have accessible routes in. So I work across the whole BBC, and I have been there for, don't judge me, I've been there for 15 and a half years, but in lots of different roles. And I actually started as a radio producer and just did that for a few years, realised it wasn't quite right for me, and went on a little bit of a journey to discover what was the right role for me. And it's been around about 5-6 years. I've been working within outreach, really just targeting what is often called hard to reach audiences, but what I call we're not working hard enough to reach them.
Love that.
So that's me.
Amazing, thank you. Jane?
Yeah, so I'm Jane Hatton, and I founded Evenbreak, and I'm the CEO of Evenbreak. And Evenbreak kind of happened by accident. So I was in the field of diversity and inclusion anyway, and but when I talked about disability particularly, and I wasn't disabled at that point, there was a real obvious gap in the whole D&I landscape around disability. It was not seen as important. It was the bottom of the list of priorities, even if it was on the list at all. And I remember thinking somebody should do something about that. And then, quirky twist of fate, I became disabled, so had a spinal surgery and ended up not being able to really walk very far or stand or sit for very long. So I was literally kind of flat on my back for the best part of 7 years. And just lying there in bed with a laptop above me, thought, actually, nobody is doing anything about this, maybe I should. So Evenbreak kind of grew from there. That's kind of 13 years ago, but it's grown exponentially in ways I never imagined it would. And so all those years on, there's now about 24 of us, and we're global. We're the only global disability job board that's run by and for disabled people. So I'm very, very proud of the team and where we've got to today.
major thank you again to incredible organisations who have a huge remit in terms of making impactful change when it comes to disability inclusion. Obviously, different size organisations.
Slightly.
Similar.
Only in terms of people.
Yes.
But, you know, in terms of ambition, I would say we're the same size.
I love that. And it's all about impact, isn't it? And it's, phenomenal. So, as we know, in the Good Now podcast, we do a video called 3 Questions in 3 Minutes. So, this is a quick fire round just to get conversation going, to get to know you both. So we have 3 questions. 2 are set by the Good Now team, and the third question is set by our previous guests. So I'm going to start with Jane, and then we'll come to Rozana. So Jane, who is your leadership idol and why?
I think my leadership idol would be Nelson Mandela, but I've never met Nelson Mandela, so I think if I brought it a bit closer to home, it would be Lord Herman Ouseley, who was the first black chair of the Commission for Racial Equality, and I heard him speak on a number of occasions, and I loved the way he talked about really controversial subjects, but he started where his audience was at and brought them with him, so it wasn't a confrontational, it was very much a collaboration approach, and I learnt an awful lot from that, and I probably don't do it very well in my own role, but that's something I try and emulate.
Amazing, thank you.
Okay, me. So mine has to be kind of author and just all-time icon of mine, Brené Brown.
Yes.
I just think her focus on vulnerability and openness and empathy is something that's so key in the workplace, especially when you're talking about inclusion. And that's definitely an approach that I've always wanted to take. And I promise I didn't notice there was a book behind me.
Indeed.
I absolutely promise I didn't. And you can be the judge of that. You know that. But but I'm glad to see that she's here on the bookshelf as well.
Indeed, one of Good Now team's favourite books is Dead Lead, so absolutely can see why that's amazing. And I can stay with Rozana for the next question. What was the last film you watched?
Okay, I don't remember when I last watched a film, but so I'm not really answering this question, but I will. Classic BBC. I recently watched Culinary Class Wars, right? I'm obsessed with it. And it's a Korean TV show that's like Power 100, if you ever saw that. And it's just bonkers, and it's incredible, and super intense and super creative. And so not a film, but a TV series, so I've slightly twisted that, sorry.
I'll have to go and Google that.
You have to see it, it's mad.
No, that will. Thank you. And Jane?
So I don't watch many films, and I'd like to say, oh, that was a really worthy documentary type film, but the last film I actually watched was Frozen 2 with my 6-year-old granddaughter. And
my favourite Frozen, though.
Yeah, definitely.
The
and the music, music is amazing.
Epic.
So I'm afraid that's not very worthy, but that is actually the last film that I watched.
Interesting choice. Might have to let that go. Is that the word? I do. On that note, let's move swiftly on to the third and final question, which was set by our previous guest. Can you name a TV program or TV personality that you believe best represents disability in TV and media?
I think I would go, I'm sorry this isn't BBC, I know, I'd go with The Last Leg on Channel 4, because it started as around the Paralympics, so its focus was disability, but it's morphed into a kind of comedy current affairs type programme, so it doesn't just focus on disability, it just happens that two of the presenters are disabled, and they cover disability issues, but they cover all sorts of other things as well, and so I quite like that.
Yeah. And mine is BBC, because of course I'm on brand. Mine would be Chris Packham. I just, you know, almost like for the opposite, right, of Jane's example, is that he is a presenter in his own right, has been for, you know, a very, very long time across the BBC in lots of different areas. But then, you know, in the last few years, more recently, has done documentaries around like his My Autistic Mind, which is his series. And being really open and really challenging perceptions around neurodivergence, and for someone of such a high profile to lead the way in that space is incredible.
And we need more of it.
Yes,
We
please.
need more. Because, again, I think we talk about this notion of minority groups, but in reality, when it comes to diversity, there's so many people who are underrepresented in society. So yes, definitely we want more.
Yeah, the other one I liked actually was CSI when...
I think you need
Oh, Silent Witness?
Yes.
Silent Witness.
CSI!
Yes.
Silent
I knew I
Witness
meant.
on the
Can we
BBC.
I love this car.
Liz Carr.
Liz Carr.
I
Liz
love
Carr
Liz
in Silent Witness,
Yeah.
because she played a role that was not for a disabled person. She just played. She was a forensic scientist.
I go on.
And that
And
was good.
it is, like we say, it's all about representation. The more that, and especially this is really the premise of the BBC in terms of like it is a public service, so we want the public to see themselves represented on its screens or on its radio or online in all these different forms. And, you know, that is why, you know, we're along with other broadcasters really trying to push those kind of boundaries and making sure that we are really covering diverse representation.
Yeah, I love that. And to Adam's style, I did really well at keeping 3 questions in 3 minutes. But I love it. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we're going to move in to the kind of meaty bit of the topic now, which of course is inclusive recruitment. Can I start off with maybe I'll start with Jane and come to Rozana after? Why do you think the disability employment gap is so significant, and why the hell is it not moving?
You know, it appalls me that it's so bad, and it's bad in the UK. It's even, you know, greater in other countries, worse, you know, in terms of the gap in other countries. I think a lot of it is down to the general narrative around disabled people, and that even as disabled people, you know, we hear that narrative about disabled people being less than, so not as good as, less productive, off sick all the time, bit of a danger in the workplace, very expensive, all of those. And none of those myths are true in reality. But if you're an employer and you believe those myths, you're not going to employ disabled people. So I think it's partly ignorance, but I think it's also fear. There's a kind of, oh, disabled people don't know what we should say or what we can't say, or are we going to offend somebody, or there's that fear element as well. So if you've got 2 candidates and one of them is disabled and one of them isn't, your typical hiring manager will think, let's go for the easy option, let's go for the non-disabled one. And so I think it perpetuates itself, because the less we see disabled people in ordinary, diverse roles, the less we can see that that's something that's possible for all organisations. So I think it's a combination of fear and ignorance.
Yeah, and I definitely echo what Jane's saying, but I think it's also about the ways or the different styles that we apply or want people to apply for jobs, and having a slightly more openness about things around like job descriptions, application forms. So especially if you're neurodivergent, for example, I know for myself, when I see a job description, I'm just kind of be so overwhelmed by it that I just go, oh, you know what, it's not for me. It's too much. It's too far. And actually, something that we've recently been trialing as part of the BBC Extend Talent Pool is doing like video explainers of jobs. And I've done a couple now where I sit with a hiring manager and I'm like, tell me what is the job? Like, let's just stop doing it with all the words. What is the job? What are the skills you're looking for? And let's just be like really clear and succinct and concise about it and human about it. And they've actually gone down really, really well. And it's just providing, content in a different format because people receive things in different ways. And just really being clear and not trying to overcomplicate things. And I think it definitely helps people go, oh, okay, right. That I can resonate with that. I will apply for that role. Yeah. So just looking, and definitely at the BBC, we're looking, experimenting in different ways that we can do that, whether that's application forms, whether that's reasonable adjustments in the workplace, like just knowing that it isn't one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the recruitment process itself is so unfit for purpose for most people, not just for disabled candidates, but things like, that we tend to rely on CVs and interviews. And we know that if you've had lots of advantages in life and you've not faced many barriers, you've had a great education, you've not been discriminated against, your CVs can look pretty good. But if you're someone who's maybe had undiagnosed dyslexia or ADHD, or you're autistic and maybe you don't do well at interviews, so your CV doesn't reflect your brilliance, you're not going to get through to the next stage in the process. And also interviews, we know that the people who do really well at interviews are people who are extrovert, confident, great interpersonal skills, that can come into the interview room and shake the hands firmly of all the panel and smile, and they're sitting there in their lovely suits and they've got really good slick answers to the questions. Those are the people who get the jobs. Yeah. And you might get someone who kind of shuffles into the room, doesn't make eye contact, looks at the floor, fidgets a bit, stumbles over their words, but they might be the best candidate. Yeah. So why are we testing people on how good are you at blagging at interviews rather than how good are you at doing those skills that your hiring managers were talking about?
Yeah. I used to, before this role, I used to run the outreach for Radio 1, One Extra in Asia Network, and we used to have did Where It Begins scheme, which is an intern scheme, and when we did the interviews, we used to tell all of our interviewers, like, listen to the ideas and the passion, not how they say it, not whether, how they making you feel, or, do they have great ideas and do they have passion? Because the rest of it we can work on. Yeah.
I have to say, I love the video explainer idea. I think we might need to get a best practice buzzer. I think I could hit when those ideas come up, because that's game changing for a lot of people, I think, and amazing. Thank you for that.
I think it's just about also just being bold and trying something.
Yeah.
Like,
if it doesn't work, you've learned from it.
No, because of course at the BBC it's a huge organisation. We can't roll that out on everything straight away, but let's just try it. And I think, that would be my message to other organisations, is just try it with one role and see how it goes.
Yeah. Why do you think we get nervous about these bold changes? Because if you think about working from home 5 years ago, and for Jane, I had similar conversations with HR directors of, we can't allow our staff to work from home, they won't get any work done. And sadly it takes a pandemic probably to go, well, actually it can work. So what is the blocker for being bolder and making these changes, do you think?
I think that Jane touched on it. Fear. Fear of getting it wrong, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. I think that's a huge part of it. And I also think it's time and capacity and resource, and that is, unfortunately, that is the reality of the workplace. But I think it's just, again, trying to tell organisations, just try and find and give people that grace and give people that space to be bold and be honest.
And it's weird, isn't it? Because that was, worse than unfortunate. But, it's a terrible, terrible thing to happen, the pandemic. But one of the things it did provide was a great social experiment in people working from home. Because all of a sudden, instead of, employers saying, no, you can't have that as a workplace adjustment, everybody had to do it overnight. And we've proved that it works. We've proved that not only do people work from home, actually they tend to work, if anything, harder and longer hours because they don't get the interruptions that maybe they would in the workplace. But there are still many organisations going back to 5 days a week in the office.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's probably something around trust. So if we don't trust, you know, I feel like saying to a manager, if you don't trust your team, either you've recruited the wrong people or you're not managing them as well as you should be, because Evenbreak has been working from home since we started, long before the pandemic was ever heard of. And in this case, I know not everybody wants to work from home and people should be given choice. Yeah. But actually for some disabled people, working from home is great because you haven't got to worry about inaccessible transport, you haven't got to worry about inaccessible building. I mean, there are obviously downsides as well in that you might not feel as though you're a part of the team. But having that option, and it shouldn't just be an option for disabled employees, it should be an option for everybody, just gives people more of an opportunity to do that job. And most jobs can, obviously there are some jobs that can't. You can't be a surgeon working from home. But for
give it
lots
time, a couple of years. A couple of years, I reckon, with AI, we might be able to do that.
It's possible. Everything is possible.
We could put people performing operations using a PlayStation controller. Who knows?
Anything is possible. But trust is, 100% agree with Jane on that one. And trust that your employees know what's best for them.
Yeah.
So whether that's working from home, like you said, or whether it's certain equipment that they need, or certain time, or flexible hours, like trust that they know what they need. It's so crucial.
And because if you don't, you're judging people on presenteeism, which has always been a problem. So we have people who work very, very long hours and people think, oh, they're so committed, they're great workers. But actually, if you look at what they're producing, it might not be great. You might have someone who works half that time but actually produces twice as much. And I'd rather look at what is someone achieving, what outputs are they're making, rather than how many hours are they sitting at a desk, because I don't really care.
Do either of you watch Diary of a CEO by Simba? I was listening to a clip of his the other week, and he was interviewing someone that used to work for Steve Jobs. And this person said to Steve before he sadly passed away, what is your most best product that you've ever made? Is it iPhone, is it iPad, the watch, the Mac? He said no, it was the team. Because without the team, Apple couldn't have developed in the way it did and get to those products. So with that in mind, I think it says to me that one of the most important products for any organisation is the recruitment process. So my next question with that in mind is, what does the ideal inclusive process look like, in your opinion? It's a big one.
That's a big one.
Let's start with that one.
Come on, you take that one.
Because I wrote a book on this.
Yeah, you should know a little something.
I think where we go wrong is we think that one process is going to work for everybody. And we're all different. We all, like different things. Some people, I'm quite good at interview, I'm quite good at blagging. I'm not very good at doing many things, but I'm quite good at blagging.
You're good at writing books.
I'm good at writing books. But, not everybody is. And actually, it should be about a choice. So we try at Evenbreak to remove as many barriers as we can. So it's things like where you advertise, what it says on the advert, how you, what the application process looks like. So, for example, what we might do is say, what we do is say, we don't want to see your CV. These are and it wouldn't be any more than 5 top things. So as you say, you look at a laundry list of 30, essential requirements. You think, no. So no more than 5 absolute must-haves that this role needs, and its skills or strengths. And then you say to the candidate, how can you demonstrate that you can do these 5 or 4 or however many it is things in a way that suits you? So that could be a video. It could be dictating over the phone. It could be a written submission. It could be an example of something they've done before. It doesn't matter. All I want to know is, should I shortlist this person? And the only way I'm going to do that is by knowing if they have the absolute essential requirements for this role. So giving people choice, I think, is essential. And then again, with interviews, instead of saying to somebody, how well do you do this task? Here's the task, show us how well you do it.
Yeah.
And then I know how good they are at the job, not how good they are at talking about how good they are at the job. So for me, it's about removing all of those barriers, and it's about how can you actually assess the candidate in a way that means you know how good they're going to be in that future role, rather than what have they done in the past and have they been really schooled to do fantastic interviews. I'm not really interested in that. I just want to know, can they do the job?
Yeah, and I think also evolving, right? Because everything is changing, everything is evolving. What was, what we felt was inclusive 5 years ago is changing again. So it's about evolving with the process and just being open to it. I think in terms of the BBC, one of the things that we're super proud of is our BBC Extend, which, is really a great showcase for kind of inclusive hiring. So, sorry. So BBC Extend has been around forever. I think it's been around for about 20 years, and it used to be a scheme, but now it is a kind of a positive action program where we ring fence any role in the BBC. Ideally a permanent role, but it could be a fixed term contract, it could be in Glasgow, in Cardiff, in London, in news, in production, anywhere. We ring fence roles for disabled candidates, and that removes some of that concern that we spoke about earlier about, is this role right for me, or can I apply? Or no, we're saying like this role is for a disabled candidate. We want a disabled candidate to apply for this role. And we can do that, and they can apply for any role in the BBC. They don't need to just apply for a BBC Extend role, but it does just give them that, I guess, that safety net and that security to know that this role is this role is intentionally for disabled and neurodivergent candidates. So I think that is, a really, really positive step. And then also just being really open to those conversations around reasonable adjustments. Because we often get asked, well, can I give me a list of reasonable adjustments? It's like, there is no list long enough. It's whatever that individual feels that they need it. Whatever that individual thinks is a barrier for them, how do we remove that? They don't even need to know the answer. They don't even know to say, because I think that's often a bit of a concern, right? Is people go, well, I don't know what I need to ask for. You just tell us what the barrier is, and we'll help you find out what the answer is. So there's a lot of work being done in that space, but it's constant evolving. There's no perfect process. It's not one size fits all. It's really about listening to each of the candidates and working together to get the best result for them.
I think training hiring managers is important too, because they've been conditioned that disabled is not as good as disabled. Actually, we call our candidates premium candidates at Evenbreak, because, the very virtue of being disabled means that you face barriers every day. So you're going to gain skills, whether you want to or not, like problem solving, like creative thinking, like communicating your needs or whatever it might be. And you don't leave those at the door when you come to work. You bring those with you. And I think it's trying to change the narrative so that hiring managers aren't thinking this person is going to be a problem, and start thinking, oh, this person's going to be a real asset to the team. And it's changing that whole mindset and actually making hiring managers feel confident to have those conversations. And as you say, it isn't about, oh, you're autistic, well, we've employed somebody like you before, so you're going to need A, B, C. It's about, this is what the job involves, as you say, what's going to cause a problem for you, what can we do to make this work for you, and then listen to you don't have to have the solutions. There are lots of places you can go to for the solutions. You just need to find out from that candidate. And you might have employed 20 people with exactly the same condition, but you still ask the question to the 21st, because they may need something completely different.
One thing I find puzzling, and we come across it quite a lot, if I'm honest, is we meet loads of amazing English writers, but when it comes to the job ad or the job spec or the application form, not until you get to the bottom and you get in small print that we are an inclusive employer, we want to attract diverse talent. And sure, I completely believe that. But why isn't it at the top? Why are we not shouting from the rooftops about it? I think there's so many small changes that can be made that don't need to cost money. They can be change the dial and really speak more to the candidates and build confidence in the candidates to want to apply. So thank you, we're now going to move on to our next feature in the podcast, which is called Beyond the Buzzword. And today I'm going to talk from a personal perspective and not necessarily an organisation one. We hear the word belonging a lot. But again, when we are talking about buzzwords, I guess we're talking about them because sometimes they can come into fashion and they can mean everything, and then they can mean nothing. What does belonging mean to you individually? I'm keen to know, I guess.
I think I feel I belong somewhere if there are people that I have things in common with there, so that I don't feel like I'm the complete outsider, but also that if I've got things that are different from everybody else, I don't have to hide it. So I can be me, and that's okay, and I feel that, this is where I belong. And it's incredibly important at Evenbreak, because usually if you're a disabled person, you're the one disabled person in that office, whereas everybody at Evenbreak has, a multitude of different barriers that we might face. But it's important that everybody feels that they belong, and I think it is that really making it clear that you can be yourself and that's fine. We don't need you to mask, we don't need you to pretend that you're anybody that you're not. In fact, it's not just that we don't want you to, it's that we really discourage it, because the things that you're masking are the things that we need. So if someone comes up with a creative idea and they think, oh no, that's going to sound a bit silly, perhaps I better not say that. No, please say it, because almost always off the back of that comes something that's incredible. And no one is going to say, well, that's a stupid idea. It's, oh, yeah, and I wonder if, and sometimes my favourite times at Evenbreak, and I have a lot of them, is when the team get together and we sort of brainstorm ideas, and somebody comes up with an idea, and somebody builds on that, and then they build, and it becomes something incredible that as a neurotypical, I would never have thought of in a million lifetimes. And for me, that's what belonging means. It means for people to feel safe to say, these are my views, without thinking, am I going to be shot down in flames? And that's what it feels like for me.
Yeah, my personal kind of experience has been, anyone that knows me, and I'm sure just at the times that me and Jane have met and just meeting today, you all know, or people will always be very surprised to hear that I work in HR. Because I don't always have a filter, I'm not always that serious. And so when I moved from the pop networks, it was fun, and it was always a good vibe. To move to HR, everyone was like, I'm going to have to be really serious. And you're just like, focus and don't say those things, and don't don't do that, Roz. And, it really didn't take me long when I moved into HR to be like, oh, actually, no, I can be myself. I can 100% be myself. And I feel very comfortable and very safe to do that. And then it was in my role now, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And to be able to just have a team that can just, without hesitation, and what do you need, and support that conversation where I feel, you said, safe, but also where I feel valued is another one, right? Yeah. I really felt that, for me going into HR, where, let's be honest, they are mainly more serious than me, but that my character, my personality, and also the way that I thought, and my neurodivergent brain was welcomed and valued there, because it was actually bringing something to a team that wasn't as prominent there before. Yeah. So that for me is belonging, definitely.
I think it goes back to your comment about job adverts. So if you see that bit at the bottom that says we represent, to me that looks like an afterthought that's about legislation compliance. Yes. We just don't want to be sued. Whereas if the same organisation put something at the top of the advert, not that same thing, but we really want diverse applicants because it's really good for us for these reasons.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of, oh, they're not just trying to not be sued. It's actually, oh, they do want me. They do want me to come in and be a bit different maybe and challenge the status quo and come up with new ideas.
And that's why we have Extend. Like, I know I'm going to keep dropping it, you know, but that's why we have Extend to be really, like, really blatant and intentional about, you know, the fact that we want to recruit deaf, disabled and neurodivergent talent into the BBC. And not just because it's a tick box, but because we, you know, want to have a diverse workforce so we can reflect, as I said earlier, the public, you know, because we're a public service, we want to reflect the public, and we want not just on our TV screens, but the people behind the scenes, whether they are in finance and they're paying those bills, or whether they're in production, like, you know, all of that makes the content that we make.
I'm glad you mentioned BBC Extend, because the final ending to our podcast is called Is Your Workplace Doing Enough? And we know that BBC Extend is really making impact.
Yeah.
Is there any more you can share about the programme, and how can people find out more?
Yep, well, I'm always happy to talk about Extend, Adam. First, to answer your question, is our organisation doing enough? We're never doing enough. We can never do enough. We always need to seek to do more. So, as I said, Extend had been running for 20 years. It's only been in this last year that we have taken it to this kind of next level, and I hope that we will continue to evolve it. As I said, BBC Extend is a positive action programme, and actually, just give you an example of where we are in terms of like the success of it. We launched a talent pool. So this talent pool is the BBC Extend talent pool. So we are always going to have jobs available that moment that you look, or where, you know, you see an advert. We might not have that right job for you, but if you join the talent pool, we will share with you not just BBC Extend roles, but all of the BBC Extend roles, plus any opportunities, whether that's open days in our buildings, or whether that's connecting with Evenbreak, or webinars, you know. All of that is available if you join the talent pool. So that talent pool was at 0 this time last year. We're now on just under 2,000 people in that talent pool. We send them weekly emails with jobs. Also, when we started in October, I was really fighting, as well as the team, we were fighting to get more ring fence roles. And I think we managed to get like 3 ring fence roles up until December, in those 3 months. Since April this year, we've had 77 ring fence roles.
That's amazing.
It's and so it's all I'm saying is, like, we're doing really positive work. It's never going to be enough, but we keep working and we keep pushing and we keep looking at ways of doing more. Whether those are video explainers, how do we make those, you know, more frequent? How do we make those for other roles? Whether that's ring fencing more roles, whether that's finding different new ways to support, lots of different opportunities. So if you want to join the talent pool, I will send you the link and you can put it in your notes. So that's BBC Extend, and we've got loads of roles at the moment, actually, so make sure you have a look online.
Amazing. And on your site, of course, brilliant.
Well, Evenbreak, really, we try to be a role model employer, because often when we talk to employers about employing disabled people, there's a kind of, oh, well, it wouldn't work at our place, you see, because of X, Y, Z. And I want to be able to say, actually, it does work, because that's what we do at Evenbreak, and this is... And, you know, I'm very proud that Evenbreak's success is not despite the fact that we're all disabled, it's because of the fact that we're all disabled. And we, like you say, we're continually learning, we're continually evolving, but we have the luxury of having that internal intelligence. So we can try new things, and we will have people on the team who will say, no, that wouldn't work for me, we need to think about this. So we're constantly trying new things, trying to learn. You know, we go to candidates who apply for jobs who are successful and who are unsuccessful and say what worked for you, what didn't. And actually listening to that feedback means that we can improve our process. So I don't think we'll ever get to the point, I hope we won't, where we think that's it, cracked it, got everything sorted. It's always about, okay, so how can we improve on that? It's that continuous improvement. We call it a journey, but it's a continuous journey. There isn't really a destination, because just as you think you've cracked it, something else, you know, new piece of technology comes in, we could use that now. So it's about really that continuous improvement.
Just improve it. Well, I want to thank Rozana and Jane for your amazing contributions and conversation. That is it for this episode on inclusive recruitment. I think, as you can tell from the conversation, investing in your inclusive recruitment processes is key to gaining access to an even wider pool of talent, and be bold and give candidates choice about how they can show their very best, how they can thrive in their jobs. Enjoy the episode and please share. If you want to learn more, please access our best practice portal at Evenbreak. And until next time, see you later from Include Now.